Joining us now from Westminster, Alistair Darling, former Chancellor of the Exchequer. Mr. Darling, thank you so much for joining us today. Was there a choice? Could it be done differently? What would you have done if you were there right now?
Well, I think the big difference between our approach and the new government's approach is the rate at which you reduce the deficit. There's no question that the deficit arose because we had to support the economy as other countries did. As we come through that period, you have to get the deficit down. But the question is, at what rate do you do it? Because that will determine whether or not we've got any growth in the economy. And I think the big worry is, and not just ourselves, but an increasing number of commentators, you take all this public sector money out, there's no guarantee the private sector will take its place, and there is apparently no plan for growth. And that does worry me, because if the economy bumps along the bottom, then it will be not only very wasteful in terms of job losses and lost opportunities, but also it will mean it's much more difficult to get your borrowing down.
On the other hand, you would have had to repay a huge amount of interest on public debt if it was being done more slowly, and surely the markets would have punished the UK for that.
Well, look, I think the economy, the United Kingdom economy, is fundamentally strong. The risk is, though, if you take a lot of money out of the economy very quickly, and you're talking about £80 billion here, and you lose 500,000 jobs, that you damage the prospects of getting a recovery and getting growth in the future. Now, that's not just my concern, it's a concern of a growing number of respected commentators. So I don't think anyone would doubt that you need to get your borrowing down, because you don't want to be paying any more than you have to in relation to debt interest, but you have to do it in a way that doesn't damage either the economic fabric of the country. You also have to have regard to the social fabric of the country as well, of course.
On the other hand, under a Labour government, the social fabric of the country would still have had to have absorbed these job cuts to the public sector, maybe not quite as fast, but they would have had to take place anyway. How confident are you, though, that those public sector jobs can be absorbed by the private sector, and what more could be done to make that transition?
Well, you're absolutely right and we did some of this when we were in government. If you lose public sector jobs because you're becoming more efficient or you're doing less of what you used to do before, provided those people can find jobs in the private sector, then they're still in employment, and that's fine. But what this government said in June in their first budget was that the growth was going to rely on investment levels and trade levels that we have seen in 1 year in the last 44 years, and moreover, they're going to rely on that for the next 3 years. Now, that is taking a huge risk, a huge gamble, and I think it is absolutely essential that there are measures in place to ensure that we do get growth, because at the moment, what you're finding, and not just in our country but in other countries too, the private sector is saying, well, we're just going to hold off because we're not sure what all this austerity adds up to. We're not sure if there's going to be a market there for our goods and services. The question people are asking is, where is this growth going to come from? If you look at our export markets in Europe, for example, take Germany out of it, and the rest of Europe, growth is pretty flat, and in some cases countries are going back into recession. The United States, there's a lot of worry there as to whether or not the recovery has stalled. So, when people say, where's the growth going to come from, that is a very good question, which is why I'm concerned that if you take too much money out of the economy too quickly, you could in fact derail the recovery, you don't get growth, and you actually compound your problems rather than resolve them. OK, well, let's look at
one way of potentially easing the blow, and that's monetary policy. You've suggested that you would want to see a report on the Bank of England's bond plan, essentially on any more QE, before you authorised it, if you were in a position to do so. Does that suggest, perhaps, that you think QE didn't work as well as you were hoping?
No. No, in that same interview, I made the point that I thought it did work, and indeed, it's interesting that many of the people who are now saying they would like more quantitative easing or they would consider more were roundly condemning it when we started the process 18 months ago.
So is your concern that it won't work in the future?
No. What I've said was that I think it has worked in terms of restoring confidence. But what I would like to be sure of is that this money is actually finding its way into the wider economy. And, I think if you look at the discussions the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of England have taken place, and if you look at, many commentators are saying, OK, this money is, quotes, in the economy. But my question is just to what extent is it actually circulating in the economy, or how much is it is parked in banks? So I'm not against more quantitative easing. And, I was always very clear when I was Chancellor, this is an instrument given to the Bank of England as part of its monetary policy duties, and I think that's very important that the bank has got the leeway that it needs there. But I think at the same time, it is pertinent to ask ourselves, what effect is this actually having in the real economy? I think that's a question you can ask at the same time as, I wouldn't stand in the way of the bank doing what's necessary, because, frankly, if you're having all these cuts in public sector spending and fiscal policy, then you do need some way of balancing that through monetary policy.
Mr. Darling, thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Thank you very much.